Welcome to the Darkstream. We are giving this another try. Let me know if this is working. I'm going to turn these YouTube comments on so I can see what's going on. And let's see here. So let me know if you can hear me now. Do we have it? Okay, we have audio. Very good. I was actually didn't want to have the comments up on the screen here, but tonight we're going to have to, so c'est la vie. Anyhow, sorry about that. Apparently, if you forget to turn Skype off, then it hangs on to the microphone, the old microphone, and doesn't switch it over. So anyhow, we're back. We're good. So let's talk about the subject. A couple people have been telling me that they don't understand what I mean by the fact that ethno-nationalism is redundant. And they don't understand why civic nationalism is an impossibility. And it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people, especially for those of us who are Gen X, to grasp, because we were all raised as civic nationalists. We were taught that that's what the United States was about, e pluribus unum, and so forth. Actually, Patrick Gillespie, as it happens, I was actually exchanging email with the Pornell estate today, and I don't believe that Janissary's Book 4 will be completed or released, to the best of my knowledge. But I will ask them, and I'll let you know. What I can tell you is that we will be publishing There Will Be War Volume 11. Jerry made it very clear that he wanted me to continue in his tradition, and the Pornell family was kind enough to allow us to do so, and that's a responsibility I take extremely seriously. So I want to make sure that whatever we do, it's going to be truly excellent. The bears are overrunning the stream. Help. No, Owen is very gracious as always. Always nice to see the bears. It's always kind of interesting to see the various different issues that that end up coming into the discourse when people from other communities come in. It was really strange when we were getting the discussions about stolen valor and all that sort of thing. I mean, it has literally nothing whatsoever to do with me. You know, I mean, I'm Owen's friend. I will be Owen's publisher at some point in time. But, you know, it's not like he does anything. It's not like I ever tell him to do anything. It wouldn't even occur to me to. Nice. Charles Oman, first edition. Big fan. You will get no help, only honey and claw. Hey, honey works for me. Honey works for me. I should have known something was up, because just the number of people flooding in was a little alarming. It's like, what's going on? Oh, Owen sent everybody over. Well, thanks, Owen. Appreciate it, I think. Cowboy Bear says, I wasn't raised that way, Vox. I was raised fully well knowing that the state was the Gog of Magog and will finally be the instrument Satan uses against the true worshipers. I wouldn't go that far. I think Gog and Magog have very different identities than the abstract notion of the modern state. But I do appreciate your suspicion of the satanic nature of it. So The thing that's important to understand, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, which is that nation stems from the verb that means birth. And so the nation is intrinsically a group of people who are related by blood. It's a group of people who share DNA. In fact, the interesting thing when people try to deny the fact that the nation is based on blood is that that is actually a necessary but insufficient condition. You can have two different nations that are related by blood but do not share a language or do not share religion or do not share traditions. And to have a nation, you need all of those things. And so when you look at the modern state, what you're seeing there is the same sort of wizardry that you see Owen and I and others who criticize rhetoric. It's the same sort of wizardry that you see when people are trying to deceive you. What they try to do is they try to do a bait and switch, and they exchange the concept of the nation with the concept of the state. See, Paul Wilsorg has been subjected to the wizardry. He says, who cares about the technical description? U.S. is a nation based on ideals. There's no such thing as a nation based on ideals. That's the point. A nation based on ideals is an abstract entity. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And so when and what we're seeing in the United States and what we're also seeing in France and what we're seeing in the European Union is that these attempts to convert an abstract concept and combine it with the physical power of the state and then claim that it is a nation is totally unsuccessful. It doesn't work in any way, shape, or form. And that's why the United States is in the process of falling apart. That's why the United States fought a civil war. The North and the South were actually, both of them were constituted of combinations of different nations that were becoming entirely different nations. And the United States is not a nation. The United States is an empire that is held together by force. The United States of America has been a literal military empire ever since 1865. And the fact that you bought into the post-war propaganda claiming that, oh, well, we're a union now. Here's the really interesting thing about the United States is that as ridiculous and as manufactured and as artificial and as fundamentally flawed as the European Union is, it's actually a more legitimate union than the United States. And not only that, but the union between Scotland and England, the Union of Great Britain, which is much older than the United States of America, came this close to breaking apart. In fact, if the Scottish nation, as opposed to the Scottish state, had voted, all of the actual Scots, the majority of the native Scots voted for independence. The reason that they lost is because they had been invaded by a sufficient number of English and other non-Scots who voted to keep the Scottish nation part of the British Empire. Porter Basin Bear Hodges, that's an impressive name, says, thank you for guiding me out of the Jordan B. Peterson mental prison. You're welcome. Welcome to the reprehensibles. And so Ferdinand D. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Like Russia, besides the core West Russians, the Russian Federation also reign over many people by force. Well, the Soviet Union was an empire, and the Russian Federation is a much smaller version of that, no question. Bear, Bear Goldsmithing says, Civil War may be a hoax. Have you heard of 1850s mud flood and Tartaria cover-up? In 1870s, there were mostly, or no, there was a actual civil war. That's ridiculous. Dyer believes Imperium. Your dialogue would be great. Hey, Jay Dyer and I respect each other. We like each other. I'm sure we'll get together sometime and talk. We're just really busy right now with Alt Hero and the comics and the Indiegogo Legal Front. I'd love to get together and talk with Jay sometime. He's a very smart guy. Cordell Mitchell says, I know it's unrelated, but damn, you can write, Vox. A Throne of Bones is great, and the voice actor you picked is fantastic. Just had to send you some props. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that. That audiobook, the audiobook for A Throne of Bones is 31 hours, 22 minutes long. It's a recording, a narration of the first of my epic fantasy novels. And, we waited 5 years because we were not willing to compromise on the voice that we wanted. And Jeremy Daw just did a fantastic job. He was exactly what I envisioned for it. It's interesting because I think if you compare the job that Jeremy did with The Throne of Bones and you compare it to one of the best-selling audiobooks of all time, which is A Game of Thrones read by Roy Dotrice, I honestly think that A Throne of Bones is better. So anyhow, judge for yourself. But I'm very pleased with that. Do you have Bone of Thrones in paperback? Yeah, there's it's in paperback and hardcover, 924 pages. WTF is so bad about Jordan Peterson. Well, how much time do you got? What's bad about him is he's a globalist. What's bad about him is that he's a habitual liar. What's bad about him is that he's mentally ill. What's bad about him is that he is attempting to destroy the American identity. What's bad about him is that he's attempting to destroy Western civilization. What's bad about him is that he practices the occult, and he attempts to teach people a evil philosophy of mediocrity, fear, and suffering that will benefit absolutely no one except for his globalist masters. Jordan B. Peterson is one of the more evil people in the public space today. He is an unmitigated evil. There is nothing good about him whatsoever. He's a liar, he's a deceiver, and he's an intellectual charlatan. So I don't know what you think is positive about him, but I guarantee you, if you look into 100 of his followers, his serious followers who have attempted to live their lives by his 12 rules of life, I think that you will almost certainly find that within 2 years that they will be worse off than they were when they started following him. William Parks asks, what new comics do you have coming out? In physical, the full 320-page Rebel Dead Revenge is going to be out soon. The first Alt Hero 1 through 6 omnibus is going to be out soon. Quantum Mortis 4 just came out. Avalon 3 just came out. So we've got a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff coming out. Vegas Bear said, I'm ashamed I had his book on pre-order before it was published. Don't be ashamed. Tons of people were fooled by him. He's very good at that. He's very, very good at that. I wouldn't be embarrassed by it. If you're looking for answers and somebody promises you answers, then it's obvious that you would start looking there. And everybody tells you, oh, he's so smart. Everybody tells you that he's so intelligent. But if you actually read his book and you actually look up the way that he gets his sources wrong, he gets his facts wrong, you know, you can't take him very seriously. I mean, how many times can you watch someone pretend that he is considering a question for the first time when he's done exactly that on stage again and again and again? He has considered these questions before. He's putting on an act. Girth Bear says, best teacher I ever had was my 8th grade geography teacher. He constantly hammered that state and nation are not the same. Critical lesson for young me. It's very important because all of the talk about, we can all be Americans is total nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Gaddafi, before he was killed, he was claiming that everyone has the right to America. And if you accept the idea that it's an ideal, then it's true. Then you have to admit that Ben Shapiro is right, and somebody who is born in Japan can be more American than a heritage American descended from the sons of the American Revolution, born in Ohio. Now, that's totally false. Would you accept that argument for the Jews? The Jews are a nation that for many, many years did not have a state. Now they have a state. It's called Israel. That's great. Israel is the state of the Jewish nation. The United States is supposed to be the state for Americans, for the posterity of the people who founded the country. It's even in the preamble to the Constitution. The Constitution is only for those people. Those are the true Americans. I mean, I always find it very funny because on the one hand, you have people trying to say, well, my Mexican neighbor's been here for 5 years and he likes apple pie and baseball. He's a real American. And yet, I've been living in Italy for over 20 years. I love Serie A. I play calcio. We keep a cucina italiana for the most part in the house. I know all about all the good Italian wines. Am I a real Italian? Do any of you regard me as a true Italian? I don't. I'm a guest. I know that. I try to be a good guest. The nation is not the state. The state is not the nation. And they try to fool you. It's wizardry. They actually changed. Do you know how they used to measure economies? GNP, gross national product. And you know how you measure it? It's not based on where you live. It was based on all the Americans all around the world. All the Japanese all around the world. That was the Japanese gross national product. They enacted little economics wizardry, and they call it gross domestic product because now they use it to just measure the state, the economic activity taking place within the borders of that particular country. Drew M. says, my father is the son of Czech immigrants. I grew up soaked in propaganda that such assimilated immigrants are what it means to be American. Exactly. It's propaganda, and it was propaganda created by immigrants. It's self-serving, anti-American propaganda. That's not American. That is literally anti-American. I'm not making this stuff up. You can look up any of this. If you want to read a fairly detailed case that addresses a fair amount of it, I wrote a book with John Red Eagle called Cuckservative. This Darkstream cover, that is from the cover of Cuckservative. We were showing graphically how the demographic composition of the United States has changed. Zowie Bear says, rumor has it that Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. would have become a new American Union if Hillary Rodham Clinton would have won. I watched a video of Ruth Bader Ginsburg stating she helped write a new constitution. Yeah, that's what they want to do. That's what Jordan Peterson is trying to push people for. That's why Peterson is always talking about identity, because what does he care about it? He's a Canadian. Joshua Bryant says hierarchy is fractal, is not as above, so below. No, it's not. As above, so below is a occult practice. It's from I guess you would call it occult theology. Hierarchy is fractal is a observation, a physical observation and mathematical observation. Foxbear asks, should the United States balkanize due to mass immigration? Well, it will. Could it be done without massive war? If it were to recombine, can it be done without war? Could it? Theoretically. Do the probabilities favor it? Absolutely not. I highly recommend that you read an essay by the great military historian Martin Van Creveld, the great Israeli military historian Martin Van Creveld. The late Jerry Pournelle actually called him a necessary addendum to Clausewitz. So let me put it this way. If you are a necessary addendum to the second most brilliant writer on war in the history of mankind, you are a special sort of genius. And I can confirm that he is. And so what he wrote, I asked him to write an essay for There Will Be War Volume 10, and he wrote a brilliant essay called War and Migration. And he demonstrates very clearly that war and migration are two different sides of the same coin. You do not have a movement of people that large without eventually experiencing war of a similar scale. Excuse me. D-Man Wyman says, how do you reconcile national loyalty with the state of our nation, having to do with America being an empire and our racial cultural differences within? Well, the nation is not a nation. And that's why so many people feel so little loyalty to it. You know, the average member of the United States electorate doesn't give a damn about the Constitution, doesn't give a damn about the fate of the unemployed white middle class. You know, they see them as the problem. They see them as you have to understand that a sizable proportion, probably a majority of the post-1965 migration looks on Americans in much the same way that the American settlers looked on the American Indian. They're in the way, and the sooner that they're gone, the better. You know, it's a bit ironic because, of course, they're not going to be able to maintain their level of civilization without it, but they don't believe that. They don't believe it's necessary. So, you know, just so you get it, I understand that civic nationalism pulls at us. We want to believe that we can all be the same. We want to believe that we can all get along. And on a individual level, we can. But the micro is not the macro. You cannot it would be disastrous if we were to make interest rate decisions based on your mortgage. And it is just as disastrous to try to make decisions about national demographics based on you and your neighbor. The micro is not the macro, and macro is more than just an inflated version of micro. Duralex Sedlex says there's not a chance that most in the former Confederate South, the Rust Belt, the Greater Midwest, or Texas would willingly go in for a USA round two if they got the chance to slip away. I don't think so. I don't think that they would. As above, so below is taken directly from the principle of correspondence from the Kybalion, which I told you about. Nothing inherently evil about it. Whether it's inherently evil or not, it is heavily used in the occult. VHS Bear is very generous and says, "Love your stream, man. I'm a Christian living in Salt Lake City, Utah. Recently went to a friend's funeral whose family was very strict LDS. I was blessed to tell him about the gospel before he passed. Advice on talking to Mormons." I think that when you're talking to Mormons, the important thing to do is to highlight the contradictions between the New Testament and the Book of Mormon, especially the part where it talks about adding to the Scripture and so forth. I don't pay a lot of attention to Mormonism, but I mean, over here in Europe, it's totally irrelevant. But I will say that some of the things about having your own planet, I don't know if they're true or not. Again, I don't pay much attention, but just the best way whenever you're dealing with something that you find dubious, and this is as true of the atheist addressing Christianity or the free trader addressing protectionism. I'm not just talking about the things that I'm dubious of. I'm saying that in general, if you're dubious of something, ask questions. Ask them to explain it. It will become clear whether it's just nonsense and madness or whether it's something that's actually sensible and convincing over time. Chamasp said, "Any thoughts on the Book of Enoch? Not particularly, although I do use it in a throne I actually use a slightly modified quotation from it from in A Throne of Bones. So, I think this guy must be talking about Peterson. Vegas Bear said, "I thought he was trying to make religion comfortable to those who didn't find it that way. It's embarrassing how far off I was, but comforting to know I wasn't the only one." You shouldn't be embarrassed. The guy is a highly skilled con man who was selected and chosen and pumped up in order to be, because he was good at being a con man. He's good at selling the con. You have to respect his ability to engage in that preemptive mirroring that he does. He goes up there, says nothing, and somehow manages to convince hundreds of people that what they already thought coming in is what he's telling them. I mean, that is a high level of wizardry beyond most of what we see. It's really rather astonishing, to be honest with you. Martin Van Who, could you spell it? Martin Van Creveld. It's Creveld. We're privileged to publish a number of his books. We're actually going to be republishing one of his classic ones. If you're interested in he's written a brilliant book. I wish we published it, called The Transformation of War. The books we publish an excellent one that's a really good starter for people interested in military history and strategy, called A History of Strategy. And we publish a number of his other books like Equality, The Impossible Quest. We also publish his intellectual autobiography, Cleo and Me. Gigi, which I'm going to say because his name is totally unpronounceable, says, "Why wouldn't the United States just become a kind of Brazil North?" Because there isn't a dominant, and there are too many interest groups. There are too many rival interest groups. In Brazil, you basically have 4 different groups, and they fill different segments of society, and they more or less get along. Here, in Latin American countries, they generally have a white upper class that rules over the mestizo and native lower classes. And it's been that way because they had, you know, Spanish mini empires set up over them and have for, you know, many years. Um, the U.S. did not ever develop that, and so no one's going to accept that. I mean, it's a very different sort of situation. Um, let's see. There Will Be War Volume 10 is amazing. I was really happy with that. That was my first chance to actually work directly with Dr. Jerry Pournelle. It was a tremendous privilege. I really enjoyed getting the chance to get to know him, and it was it was occasionally challenging. Um, you know, he was very opinionated, and you know, I was a huge fan of the books in the '80s when I was in high school, and so getting to work with Dr. Purnell was a real dream come true, and to, you know, be his editorial heir in a sense is something that I'm both proud of and something that I take extremely seriously. That's one of the reasons why we haven't rushed out with anything quickly, because, you know, I only want the very, very best stuff. I want it to be worthy of the previous 10 volumes. So, um, anyhow, you know, I don't know. It's sometimes a little hard to discuss these concepts because they seem so obvious to me. You know, like, why would you ever believe that the state is the nation or vice versa? I mean, it's kind of funny because people say, "Oh, you're a collectivist," but what you need to realize is, and maybe this is better rhetoric for you, civic nationalism is statism. It is literally statism. You are saying that the state is the defining identity. To be civic nationalist is to be a statist in a way that no nationalist ever could be. Oh, and here we got some what about meism. Look, what did I do? You're missing. Mexican Libertarian says, Vox, I accept the points you're making, but what does that mean for me? I don't care. I don't care what this means for you any more than I care what the next move that the Federal Reserve makes with regards to interest rates has on your mortgage. I am discussing significant macro societal issues here. And you're asking me, well, what about me? How would I know? It's not up to me. What does it mean for me, born of Mexican parents living in the US? It means you're an invader. Okay? Your parents invaded the country along with, 25 million others. And now you are part of the process that is breaking apart the United States. I realize that you didn't intend that. I realize that you didn't want that. You know, I understand that Mexicans in Mexico don't see you as Mexican, but you know what? You're not an American either, and you never will be. You can be a U.S. citizen, you know, but being a paper American doesn't make you an American any more than being a paper Italian or a paper German makes me one of those. It just doesn't. It never will. And the more that we pretend it does, the more that we swallow the propaganda, the more that the more that we ensure that those cultural conflicts eventually rise to the fore and bring about the usual war, devastation, tragedy, etc., etc. You know, It's not your fault. I mean, I'm the great grandson of a Mexican revolutionary myself. You know, I'm not claiming to be in any different or better position than anyone else. You know, there's a great, there's a really great section of War and Peace, if you've ever read Tolstoy. And it's really fantastic because he shows how even the people who think they are in charge, even the people who really believe they are in charge, even the people that everybody else believes are in charge, aren't. He's talked specifically about the Battle of Borodino. And he talks about how, I think it's Kutsutov. Let me look this up real quick. He talks about how Napoleon, and yeah, it is Kutuzov. That was Kutsutov. Anyhow, Mikhail Kutuzov. Tolstoy is talking about them, and he's talking about how everybody believes that the battle took place and was won and so forth by the actions of those two men. That one general won, the other general lost, etc., etc. But he points out that at the three critical points of the battle, neither Napoleon nor Kutuzov was in a position to make any decisions at all. They weren't in a position they didn't even know about it at the time. And what he was explaining there, what he was using the battle to explain, is the concept that these great trends of history are beyond human control. You know, it's not that human action doesn't cause them. Collective human action taken in the whole does cause them, but the relationships are so complex and the trends are so great that there is very little, if anything, that anyone at all, even the rich and powerful who think they're controlling everything, there's very little they can do about it. You know, the great and powerful of the European Union did not want Brexit. The French government does not want the Gilets jaunes growing in power and influence. There's absolutely no way that the Eurocrats wanted Santo Matteo in power in Italy. You know, but there's nothing they can do about it because, as I've said for 10 years now, the wave of nationalism is upon us. We are 10 years past the peak of the open society, the lunatic society. We're well beyond that. Let's see here. I'm missing some chats here. I need to scroll up. Okay. If I miss one, I apologize. I will get to it later. Daniel Paul says, folks, what it means for you is that you need to ask God for the strength and wisdom to do what is right. Well, here's the thing. If you really care about your adopted country, here's what I don't understand. People say, oh, I love America so much. I would die for it. Okay, so you would die for it, but you're not willing to leave to save it? How does that make any sense? It tends to call your commitment into question, doesn't it? Pale Rider Bear. Oh, there's a scary name. I think one reason Jordan B. Peterson takes long pauses is because he's not a right-winger and he's trying to transform his globalist ideas into something that sounds right-wing. JBP and Trump Jr. talking about abortion showed JP doesn't get right. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, I talked to Jack Posobiec a bit. If you saw that video, you can see that Jack is in the video, and he was very, very critical. He's like, why does anyone think this guy is anything but a lunatic? He's like, it was just pure babbling word salad. We were like, why don't you just take some questions? rather than talk. um, but another reason that he pauses all the time, I mean, yes, it's partly for dramatic effect, but it's also because he's a charlatan. He's a con man, and he's terrified of making a mistake that's going to expose himself. You know? TB88 says, any idea how to maintain strong families in a society that has free movement and huge job markets? Should there be restrictions to encourage family? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the making a god of economic growth has destroyed the family. The reason that family is stronger in the Midwest than in, say, California, the reason California is such a basket case is because no one has any roots there. My family, one part of my maternal family is actually very, very old California. But no one's there now. Most of the people that are in California, half the people that consider themselves native Californians weren't even born there. And the mobility of labor, which is something that the globalists actively push for. The economists of the European Union have been actively trying to increase the 1% rate of labor mobility in the European Union. They've been wanting to increase it to the 3% that they have in the States. But just the 3% labor mobility in the States has been enough to completely destroy the family on the West Coast. And if you were to, and this is the basis of my argument against free trade, which even PhDs and professional economists have agreed is absolutely devastating to the argument for free trade. And that is that if you did what free trade is supposed to do, and you created that level of free trade in the global economy, in order to get the benefits that free trade is supposedly going to give you, 49% of Americans under the age of 35 would have to find employment outside the United States of America. You cannot have a nation, you can't even have a viable state with free trade. And that's why it's not going to work. That's why it's going to fail. Born Again Bear says, when someone is looking to move to the country of their bloodline but have a mixed bloodline, what should they consider when deciding location? I think you should go wherever you feel most comfortable and wherever you're most accepted. I mean, I don't think we don't have yet, and I very much hope that they don't get to the point where they are actually testing your DNA to decide whether you get to stay somewhere. But it could get to that point because we've gone so far in the other direction. And that's a real problem. But it could get to that point, and it probably will get to that point in one or two very extreme states. But let's see. Civic nationalism is about free association. You literally want to use the state to aggressively enforce racial purity? That is communism. No, you're a moron. Communism has nothing to do with race. Communism, in fact, free association and free trade is something that is absolutely supported by communism. Communism is all about class identity crossing national borders, national and racial borders. You have literally no idea what you're talking about. Civic nationalism is not about free association. It's about destroying nations. And for you, you're saying you literally want to use the state. You are trying to transform an individual's identity into one that is totally dependent upon the state. You are far more of a status than I could ever be. Duralex said, Mexican libertarians should return to Mexico, start a militia, become a warlord, destroy the cartels, and establish a new junta. Then profit. I think that's maybe a little ambitious. Let's see. I don't know who you're talking about. Somebody said ban him, please. I don't know who you're talking about. Let's see. Okay, so apparently the chat's gotten a little out of hand. Let's see. Who do we have that is causing trouble here? Let's look it up. Moth the Boy Tech says, I'm a man of no nation. I was born in the Mormon colonies in Mexico from Mormon polygamists that came from Utah. Second generation born in Mexico. Now I am living in the USA. I am mixed race. Do I choose then? Yeah, you have to choose. You know? I mean, what else do you do? What else can you do? Charles, repeat your question if I missed your super chat. I can only scroll up so far, and it's been going. Oh, here. Up Chuck McDuck said, Vox, can America create a homogenous new nation? No. It seems there are too many divergent cultures to make it work. You're confusing nation and state. The American nation exists whether the state exists or not. Think about the Jewish nation. But there are far too many nations in the United States of America for the state to hold together. It's going to break up. I'm looking for Charles's question here. I don't think there's necessarily any. I don't think there's any need to ban QB4U yet, at least. Foxbear, morons need to be exposed to information too. Foxbear says, when the U.S. splits due to immigration, will it be from natural internal conflicts or attempted false flags? I think it's actually going to be, these things are usually provoked by, external things. Usually the empire goes too far and loses a war, loses a big battle, and that completely changes the people's perception of their place in the world. Jay from NWC is right. A multi-ethnic country is really a multinational country. That's correct. It's a multinational state. You know what the nation state is? We have a word for a multinational state. It's an empire. I strongly suggest reading the book, The Virtue of Nationalism. Hasgany really addresses a lot of these things. Bokolak has a good question. How do you reconcile your ethno-nationalist views with being an American immigrant in Italy? Very easily. First of all, there's no such thing as ethno-nationalism. The correct question is, how do you reconcile your nationalist views with being an American immigrant in Italy? First of all, I am myself multi-ethnic. I'm an American Indian, I'm an American, and I also have Mexican heritage. And so, like I said, you just have to choose sometimes. Now, we happened to find a place that we were happy, where we're welcome, where I think that we're generally considered to be very good guests, and it works out. Again, don't confuse the macro with the micro. Whether I am a complete hypocrite or not is totally irrelevant. And so the truth is what it is. If Italy were to turn on foreigners, then I would certainly be potentially at risk. But it is what it is. I mean, you just have to deal with the situation as you find it. Um, it's just like I might think that we should raise interest rates, but I'm still going to get the best interest rate that I can when I'm taking out a home mortgage. So, and that's the other thing too you need to keep in mind is that immigration and in migration in very small doses doesn't really matter. There doesn't have to be, there's not a problem when you're talking about very small numbers. I think that you can even make a good case for small amounts of migration or small amounts of immigration being beneficial. What is not beneficial is when you have enough immigrants to create a interest block. And that's where you have the big problem. In your opinion, how long does Ireland have to reverse course before the Irish nation is destroyed? Oh, they'll be fine. The European Union is going to fall apart long before they run into those issues. I'm going to stop here and see if I can find any super chats that I missed. To be responsible about that. Super chat. Okay. Got that one. Dr. Britton says, I'm a legal immigrant to Canada from England. I've been here 20 years. I refuse to get Canadian citizenship. I'm not, I think he's saying that I'm not Canadian. I think that's the right thing. If you consider yourself to be English, then you should stay English. A man cannot serve two masters. A man cannot be part of two nations. You have to choose. Charles Carlson, there it is. He actually is. I'm glad you pointed that out. I don't understand why people think that diverse peoples will get along fine just because they pay taxes to the same place despite their different history. What's the best way to convince them otherwise? Well, you're not going to. It's way too late. It's way too late. This is becoming more and more clear to people every day. A lot of the people who used to think it was just so fascinating and wonderful that they can get, good Mexican food now are suddenly starting to get alarmed when they realize that their kids are growing up in a completely different society than the one that they grew up in. The world that they knew is lost. Frank Underwood asked, where can I find Martin Van Krel's essay on war and migration? It's in There Will Be War, Volume 10. You can find it at the Arkhaven store, arkhavencomics.com. You can also find it on Amazon. Dune Bear just said, have $10, so thank you. Dune Bear, I like the name. Who will be the main players of the post-United States? Well, I think the external players, the main external player is going to be China. That's pretty clear. I think that the Jewish influence is going to be completely diminished, most likely. We're already seeing that beginning to happen in the Democratic Party. Hopefully, we'll see the Heritage Americans reasserting themselves. Goodness, we missed some good ones here. Vox, are you aware of Neil Kramer and his esoteric perspective on life and empire? No. I see some parallels here. I trust your opinion. Also, curious, what are your thoughts as a Christian are of his supernal path? I haven't heard of him, so I don't have an opinion at all. I'm sorry. Eric Matthias Bo says, did you know Jordan Peterson cries reading his own audiobook? I'm not even remotely surprised. He probably cries reading Jordanetics too. Muffhead asks, any specific books for learning how to survive a Bosnian-style war? We're actually going to be publishing, I would look first at Piero San Giorgio's Survive, and we're going to be publishing one of his books translated from French very soon. Ben asks, hey Vox, wow, I missed a lot of these. Hey Vox, since you were a participant in the 90s music scene, I was wondering if you ever encountered Death to the World zine. No, I did not. I was more of a Mondo 2000 guy. It was created by a founding member of Sleep who became an Orthodox Christian monk. Huh. That's an even bigger transformation than my own. And I'm just going to check and see. I think I got the rest of them. Cowboy Bear says, damn, I'm already deplorable, unbearable, told I can't wear suits to work, and now reprehensible. How much more do I have to take before I carry a 2x4? I don't know. I'd go for a 357 myself, but, do what you have to do. Hey Vox, I've tried explaining this concept to my friend, but he refuses to accept that a nation is a culture and a people. Suggestions. Show him the etymology of the word nation. That would be my suggestion. Okay, I think we're caught up. If I missed yours, please don't hesitate to let me know. Let me see here. I need to catch up a little bit. When the off topic, Owen has the bears and the bear emoji. Do you want something similar for Darkstreamers? Yeah, that'd be great. The VFM usually use skulls, just so you know. But I'm open. Although I suppose like some sort of wolf thing would also be appropriate. Baron von Metzgenstein says, could you remind us how you see nations under replacement rate reversing course effectively? I think Hungary is going about it the right way. You have 4 kids, you pay no taxes for life. That is a hell of an incentive. And let's face it, Hungarian women are pretty attractive. Japan is having a hell of a time even with a propaganda campaign. Well, Japan, as my wife says, 95% of the world's weirdness comes out of Japan. So I don't think that Japan is really relevant as an example to any other nation. I lived in Tokyo for 6 months. I actually used to speak halfway decent Japanese. Tremendous respect for the culture. Love Japanese literature, but it's very unique. Joey Doherty says, how close is a possible state-led race war in the U.S. or some other Anglo-European nation? There's not going to be a race war in the U.S. It's going to be more of a all against all situation, I would think. I think that the European Reconquista is probably the direction it's going to take in Europe. People used to call the U.S. a biracial nation because whites and blacks go back so far. What common national values do American blacks and whites share? Well, not very many. African Americans are their own nation. They really are. Fox Bear says, may I be vaccinated as Fox Wolf Bear? I'm not Owen. You're welcome to call yourself whatever you like. I'm not going to tread on Owen's very, very large toes. David says, what makes a nation? Blood or selfless sacrifice? Blood. Selfless sacrifice is about Christianity. It's about individuality. Nation is about family. You're conflating two different things. Hentai was a mistake. Brenda Banks says, hey Vox, love your stream. Owen and Vox are my 2 things to look forward to at work and come home to listen every day. Well, you're welcome. I'm delighted to find that I'm actually able to do this video thing without without completely embarrassing myself. This is not my medium. I'm a writer. If you read my books, You will see that. Paywall Cigar says, do you consider white a race? I kind of see it as a way of grouping people that pose a threat to their authority and pay the bulk of taxes together, like a North Italian isn't the same as a Nordic. I think that you need to keep in mind that nation is a subset of race. That's why I keep telling people that racial imperialism is nonsensical. It's a total non-starter. You know, it's not new. It's not right wing. You know, it's suggesting exactly the same thing for Europeans that Nasser was suggesting for Arabs. It didn't work for Arabs. It won't work for Europeans. The Scottish nation is not the English nation, is not the German nation. Nations are not racial. Race is a superset, not a subset. Zowie Bear says, tip my hat to the Darkstream. Thank you, Zowie Bear. You'll note that I did actually remember the pronunciation. I am a pilgrim ancestor. It would be nice to, I think you're a pilgrim descendant, actually, but it would be nice to go, if about 100 million people would go back to their home countries, I'd like my country back. Hey, I'm an American Indian. You can all go home. No, but you know, that's what's always kind of funny about being mixed race, is that, you know, you have the opportunity to sort of identify where and how you want. So I think that you know, this stuff is not binary. Don't be a binary thinker. You know, the fact that the trends, the macro trends are pointing one way does not mean that your every personal decision has to, you know, be in line with that. You know, when you look at, I mean, you know, people sometimes say, well, you know, what do people say? You know, how do you get along with, you know, people that you think should go back to their country? Like, I get along fine with them. I'm not telling them to do anything. It's not my job. You know? I mean, and besides that, I'm not going to be impolite to people. I'm not going to be rude to people, treat people badly. I mean, you know, I wasn't rude to Japanese people in Japan for the most part. Okay, actually, now that I think about it, on several occasions I was. But that was because I was stupid and young and a foreigner. But, you know, in general, you should treat people in a polite and civil and friendly manner on an individual level, regardless of where they are, regardless of who they are, regardless of where you are. You know, we're talking about very large scale things that are going to happen regardless of what you or I think, do, or say. Bear says, thoughts on the rebuilding of the Third Temple? You know, I suppose it's going to happen at some point in time. Art and Saul has the ELOE. That stands for the Evil Legion of Evil, of course, of which I am the Supreme Dark Lord. Yeah, some of you bears may not understand that there's a whole. We have our whole thing too. And for those of you who are aware of it, I think you're really going to enjoy Alt Hero 6. Meshuggah Bear says, Vox, you've got me seriously considering repatriating myself from the U.S. to my native Britain. Thanks for the compelling arguments. Yeah, I think that people need to be, especially in these coming times, they're going to need to be around their own. You know, what I'm describing is essentially the entire recorded history of man. This whole post-World War II thing, not only is it a historical anomaly, but it's actually seen some of the largest ethnic cleansings in history. After World War II, 7 million Germans were repatriated from Eastern Europe. There was an even bigger population exchange after that in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh. And so the idea that these concepts are new or debatable or questionable in any way is total nonsense. We're just talking about the facts. We're just talking about history. We're talking about the trends of human behavior and the way that things are likely to proceed in the near future. FX says, do you consider liberty a right-wing ideal? It's a good question. 5 years ago, I would have said yes. No, I do not think that liberty is a right-wing ideal anymore. I think that it is an Enlightenment perversion of a right-wing ideal. Was it a mistake for the right to tie themselves to liberty? Probably. When you look at the historical outcome, it does appear to have been a pretty serious mistake. And okay, yeah, we'll get rid of QB for you later. He's obviously out of control. Sister says, Italians want you outbox. Yeah, see, they don't. We know they don't. In fact, after 9/11, they actually sent a policeman over asking us if we were planning to go to the States for Christmas, and they tried to talk us out of it because they wanted us to know that it's very dangerous in the U.S. right now, and they thought that we should stay there. So, not too worried about that. Is MMA gay like Owen claims? No, MMA is not gay, but I do have my doubts about the whole Brazilian cuddle puddling thing. I mean, there's MMA, and then there's rolling around cuddling on a mat with a guy for 20 minutes. I think that he might have a case there. Be polite when you racially profile someone for deportation from your utopia. It's not about race. I mean, we just talked about that. Race is a superset of nation. It's about nations. You can't have. I mean, if the Germans invade Spain, you're not going to have Spain. You're going to have a lot of really angry Germans who can't deal with the way that the Spaniards throw stuff on the ground. So, Jimmy Jones said, you read my review for Jordanetics yesterday. Glad you enjoyed it. I did indeed. It was a really good review. Thank you. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This was a little bit crazy, but welcome to all the bears. I appreciate you stopping by. If this was your first time over to the Darkstream, I hope you enjoyed it. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good evening. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.